Hello everyone. Augments are one of the newer mechanics in Lane, despite being over 2 years old, acting as a secondary pseudo-retrofit in order to give some of the older characters a bit of an extra boost in viability. This has had mixed results, with some unique orgs being fantastic for their respective ships, while others not so much. Today I thought it'd be fun to theorycraft some hypothetical new ones for a small collection of ships, some that need the extra help, and some that don't necessarily but would still appreciate it nonetheless. Let's start out with a personal favourite of mine, Zuikaku. Zui fancies herself a rival to Enterprise, but her viability doesn't really reflect that, so let's give her a hand. Her augment would give the usual 30 plus 10 aviation buff, plus 10 plus 5 reload, and the honed aviation skills effect, that improves her bomber efficiencies by 10%. Frain's Endeavour is where her individuality lies, so that's the skill we'll be augmenting. First of all, we're going to make her ramp faster, by adding a preload to the 3 or more Sakura ships condition. Also, we're going to increase the percentages slightly on her stacks and the bonus, if there are 3 IGN ships, to 25%. Originally I wanted to go 30, but this might make her a bit overtuned, especially if she's bad. With this, she'd shore up some of her weaknesses and put out high, consistent damage once she gets going. She'd still be less affected in shorter fights, but that preload is going to help immensely in those too. Since IJN carriers often like to travel in pairs, let's give her sister one too. She'll get the usual aviation buff, but this time the secondary bonus will go to her luck, granting her 6 plus 2, like Taiho. She'd also get a different effect, emergency sortie aircraft, increasing the load time on her first airstrike by 20%. The augmented skill is Crane to Protection, which is getting an additional effect. For every 1% her HP is below max, her damage will increase by an equal amount, up to a maximum of 30%. Shokaku was always getting beaten up in her career, and in-game she's quite protective of her younger sister, so we're going to mix those two aspects together and make her fight harder the more she's damaged. Her additional damage taken when she's paired will also help build this up faster, and let's be honest, if this were Marjorie they'd just slap a barrage on her and call it a day. Up next, an old fan favourite, Cleveland. If there's one thing Cleve's known for, besides being one of Lane's premier tomboys, it's her assault order skill. However, it's far too inconsistent to be anything more than a nice little bonus, and that's where the power budget for this org is going. The new Assault Order Plus would have its proc rate drastically increased, from 25 to 70%, making it far more reliable. As for stats, she'd receive 20 plus 10 to both firepower and anti-air, in addition to the slash attack spread effect. This one is definitely in need of something. Warspite is one of the first URs from before they were even buildable, and in the most oversaturated hull type to boot. So how can we make this grand old lady less behind her many UR battleship contemporaries? First is the Augment's effect. Sandy's got an entirely custom effect, instead of one of the normal ones, so Warspite will too. In this case, at the ebbing of the tide, which will grant her +1 main gun mount. I count 4 turrets, let's use all 4 turrets. As for her skill upgrade, she only has one option since Divine Marksman has already had its upgrade. The Royal Navy Legend gains the following effects. Enemies hit by her barrage take guaranteed critical hits for 8 seconds, and that barrage is now cross-fleet. The start boost will be 25 plus 10 to firepower and 15 plus 5 to accuracy, same as Princess of Wales. Unfortunately, this augment would require her retrofit to be usable, but that did give me the opportunity to take her auto-target prioritizing and turn it into a true marked for death effect. As a UR, retrofit Warspite requires high investment, and hopefully this would make it a little bit worth it. And yes, both the name of the augment and its effects are in reference to a poem written by one of her officers about her when she ran herself aground. I'll link it in the description. How about another Royal Navy BB? Monarch, because she is the only PR1 ship without one currently. She's still pretty good, and her Fate Sim already covers her support, so all that's available is to improve her barrage. In this case, the slow effect would be increased from 40 to 60%, and the proc chance is now guaranteed instead of 70%. Maybe a few extra shells in the barrage too, but I'm not sure she really needs it. Stat bonuses would be 25 plus 10 to firepower and 10 plus 15 to accuracy, same as KGV. And the effect is First Strike Firepower, increasing main fleet's firepower by 20% for 10 seconds on her first volley. Yade is my next choice, despite her being rather new, targeting her a Good Girl's Caprice skill. Right now she's the only healer Ironblood's got, but that heal is both single target and random, so this module is going to increase the number of targets that get her heal plus buff to 3. For the rest of the module, she'll get Emergency Sortie Aircraft to get that first heal quicker, and 25 plus 10 Aviation with 17 plus 5 AA for the stat bumps. This next one's another elite, Bataan. I actually kinda like it when giving a ship their historical equipment gives it some buffs, even if it's never enough to actually make that piece viable on her. With that said, Bataan's Hellcat's Raw skill is the one this orb would improve, allowing it to trigger off both the original F6F and the newer HVAR mounted version. In addition, her special airstrike would now be comprised of the HVAR version of the plane, while also being 100% trigger rate. Stat buffs for a model Hellcat are 25 plus 10 aviation and 15 plus 10 reload. And the effect is airspace training, increasing the efficiency of her fighters and torpedo bombers by 10%. For the final one, I want to try something a bit different. I want to try reworking Jean Bart's org. JB's is rather maligned, as her skill buff is on Final Shot, only adding a barrage instead of fixing her equipment restriction. Like I said, I have a soft spot for skills that incentivize running canonical equipment, but for that to be worth it, you really need to go all in and make it best in slot, or at least a competitive option for that ship in particular. Unless the gear's already good, no one's going to be upset being forced to run an Iowa gun for buffs. So in order to achieve this, I propose upping the crit rate bonus to 50%, and adding an additional plus 30% efficiency when equipped. Hopefully that should be enough to make it at least worth considering. And hey, the fact it's getting upgraded in her Augment means we don't have to worry about it if and when they get around to giving her an ultra rare retrofit. Mind you please. That's all I've got for today. What do you think? Overtuned? Undertuned? Delusional? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Man, it's really a shame how some augments turn out. A chance at a second wind only to be granted not much of an improvement. Forever cursed being not as good as they should be. Really hope the dev team gets a bit more creative with these two. For a few of them it feels like they just slap a barrage on them and call it a day. Truth be told, I kind of forget augment modules exist sometimes. I say neat when they announce new ones, and if I'm going to use a ship that has one and I've heard it's good, I might craft it, but they're kind of just there. Is that just a me thing? As always, I'm open to suggestions. And until next time, fair winds and following seas.